Good morning. This is Brigid Burke, and we're having morning coffee with Brigid. Thank you for joining me this morning. And thank you to those of you who watch this video later. Yesterday was very funny because I realized in the video that I had my laundry ready because Monday is laundry day for me. And I also have boxes of books because I have a lot that I'm selling on eBay right now from my Edward Gorey collection. Good morning. So I have a lot, so I had a whole pile of stuff over here yesterday. Good morning, Sam. I had a whole pile of stuff over here yesterday morning, and I realized in the video, I said, I literally try to turn the camera so you don't see any of that stuff, and somehow it managed to move itself, so that was kind of funny. I cut it out of the YouTube video. I was like, nobody needs to see that. It's literally like the one part of my house that it's just like people don't need to see. But anyway, that was all cleaned up yesterday, and I'm waking up today to a bit of a foggy morning. Looks like the female cardinals are out again. I had a thing last week. People who are on my my personal Facebook page know I had posted a video where the female cardinals are now clinging to the screen of my door and staring and like chirping at me. I'm like, okay, what's that about? That's usually a kind of a sign. And what's weird is my sister had exactly the same thing happen to her. So it would, so we're in my, I don't know. I know what it's an omen of, but I don't know if I want to get into that. But certainly it suggests that there are certain changes that might be afoot, and to be kind of prepared for that. Again, if at least I'm taking it in that sense. But I do have the ones that look in my window. And I would love to leave my window open in the morning, but the birds are so loud outside that I think you would not be able to hear me. I'd be shouting over the birds, which is not particularly helpful. So what I wanted to talk about today, a topic that has come up in various ways in the last, I think, well, obviously since yesterday, but there have just been a number of things, messages that I've gotten from people about stuff and other things. That brings us back a little bit to the topic that we had yesterday of the outsider. I talked a little bit about this outsider card, the Five of Pentacles. And what it is it's a matter of wanting people to like you. Okay, this is a big thing. Now, if I just back off from that a little bit, I remember probably in 2021, this was the last time I had gone for a session. A wonderful intuitive body worker named Megan Gouldner. If anybody lives in New Jersey, I think she works out of an office in Florham Park. And she is just, I think it was supposed to be like an hour and a half session or something. And I think she spent like over 2 hours with me. So, I mean, it's not always a cheap session, but it was completely worth it. And I did this just before I had quit my job. And she had said something to me at one point that's always kind of stuck with me, and that was, she said, when people have wounds in life, when people feel blocked, or when people are suffering, really, when people are suffering emotionally or mentally, or she says there's usually there's one of two sources. She said it's either that they feel that they don't have enough, okay, that they're not adequate, like I don't have enough money, I don't feel secure, I don't feel my home is secure, I don't feel, there's people who may not feel that they are, they may feel like they're in a chaotic situation and don't have a place where they feel like they're at home. And probably connected to that is the idea of isolation, the feeling that we are outside of a particular social group. And so we have the outsider card here, and the other one connected with this would be, of course, the Three of Swords, which in this particular deck, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, here it is. It's is the isolation card, okay? And of course they make it isolation, because the idea is that you are kind of frozen in this space that's away. And it's weird because now I'm looking at that and I said I did have a dream about somebody, I'm not going to say who, but I had a dream that there was a person, I was talking to them, and I think I was talking to their sister as well, but they were literally in this room that was like, they were like kind of like in this little room that was frozen. I mean, it was ice cold. And I remember kind of going up to this person saying, is there anything you need? Can I help you? And the person was like, thanks, I do appreciate it, but right now I'm here. So it was like somebody who was still in this mode of healing. But it was like they were kind of staying away from people. And this, it was that had come to mind, and something else that came up recently with some of my neighbors and so forth. But just this idea of wanting to belong and wanting people to like you. If you are the type of person who has a very gregarious personality, a Sagittarius personality, a Libra personality, I don't know, there's probably a Leo. Leo is very gregarious and can be very extroverted, I guess is the word I'm looking for. There's definitely this energy of being very social, of wanting to be with people. There's some other signs that may have problems, or if you have these signs as your ascendants or moon signs or something like that. Cancer is one. Cancer is very, very vulnerable. So oftentimes, Cancer is either going to be somebody who's very easily wounded, or somebody who puts up a lot of barriers because they've been wounded, and they don't know, and they want to make sure that they're protected, that they're safe. People who don't have a whole lot of water in their chart, who have a lot of, say, Aquarian energy or something like that, might be able to maintain a kind of an emotional detachment. Whether that's always good or not is hard to say, because, I mean, it's not a bad thing. And generally, like I said, Aquarians that I know are very, very friendly people. There's not, there's always people in each sign who is and who isn't, right? I mean, it's not that's a determinant necessarily. But Aquarians, because they're very verbal, have a very tend to get along very well with people, tend to be very social. So there's all this energy around wanting to be accepted by a group. If you do something like here I'm doing on Instagram, or if you do something on social media regularly, obviously, we get very hung up on, how many likes did we get, or how many people, or how many subscribers do we have, how many people are following us, how many people, and then if people stop following us, then you start to feel like, why did that person stop following me? Or we might get into a space where likes equals success. And that seems to really be a thing in this day and age, where social media is dominating like personal, instead of personal interaction. And there's good and bad to that, because it's, on the one hand, being able to have a medium like this, like even for my own work, I can work anywhere in the world, really. I mean, I can be here, I have to adjust for time zones and stuff, but because we have these tools that allow us to connect at a distance, then it's not like, I can only see the people in my immediate community where I live. If I was limited to that, I'd be in trouble, because I live in a rural area of New Jersey. While there are people around who are interested in the kind of work that I do, it's not what I would call the prime location for it, especially not where I live, because I live on a 1-lane road, but with pretty much no parking. So it's not the best place to have people into my space. Generally, the only people who come into my space for my work are usually Reiki clients. I mean, some in-person clients who are local, but I usually have to like move my car so they can park in my driveway. And that's hard right now because they're supposedly going to be repaving my road. But there's a whole dynamic there. Having this online interaction is good, because then I can reach out to people who I normally wouldn't necessarily know anything about me. The negative side of that, though, is that sometimes we are so involved in what's going on the screen that we don't deal well necessarily with face-to-face interaction with people. And it creates a whole new structure around boundaries and the setting and establishing of boundaries. and there's been some discussion of that recently too, like and also what we feel our social obligations are to other people. When we, as you might find, is if you are somebody who is doing something online, you might find that if you're getting an increase in messages, for example, or you're getting a lot more people messaging you and asking you questions, or if you have a Patreon and a lot of people are asking you questions, you just may find if there's an increase in that. We obviously, if you're forward facing, you want to be able to respond to everybody, but then there are some people who you need to maintain a boundary with. For a while I had some people I didn't even know, or people maybe they knew somebody that I knew. I don't know. Some people I had not met just men who would just randomly start messaging me at 3 a.m. being like, hey baby, hey gorgeous, and I'm like, delete, block, you know. I don't know you, like, you know, stay away. And I don't like that. Just hot tip. It's not a way to get my attention. Because to me, I feel like that's a violation of my boundary. Like, that would be like you coming into my house and coming on to me and I don't even know you. It's like, excuse me? So, and I don't know. I think women certainly have a certain, maybe have certain issues around boundaries that maybe men don't. Because I know of men who feel like, well, no, I just need to answer everything that comes to me. And I'm like, well, you know, do you? I mean, do you need to? I think sometimes there needs to be a prioritization there of, like for me, I prioritize people on my Patreon a lot of the times. I mean, I don't have such a huge amount that it matters. Generally, I can answer everybody. If someone comes on Instagram and is trying to sell me something on their service, I don't feel obliged to answer them, because I feel like, no, if I don't, unless I want your service, and I'm not really, I don't tend to trust things when they come in through DM. If I get unsolicited DMs, like that's another thing. It's like, I feel like, I mean, you can cold call your service or whatever, but I don't have to want it. And my feeling has been that if I respond to that, sometimes all that does is provoke further responses, even if my response is no thank you. Because then somebody says, oh, well, at least you paid attention, so I can keep pushing. That's kind of a sales thing, like where you feel like you can keep pushing somebody. You know, if they show they show that they at least read your email without deleting it, then they feel like, oh, well, that's a hopeful sign. And that's the way I feel. To me, you know, there's perseverance, and then I don't know. I find that if I've politely told somebody yes, no, thank you, have a nice day, and they keep bothering me, then it's like that. Then that really tests the Mars side of my chart, and I'm just like, how many ways do I have to say no? Because to me, because I think some people think they can eventually convince you, and for me, it has the opposite effect. It has basically, I feel like if I want your service, I'll ask for it. I think that's why I'm not very good at that with people. People say, oh, you can increase your business by cold calling or sending out these kind of mass messages, and I'm like, I don't like getting those things. I find it annoying. And maybe there is an audience that, maybe there are people who say, oh yeah, this is the synchronicity, this came in at the right time. So I try to do anything like that very sparingly, because I don't, you know, I want, yes, obviously I want to promote my business and I would like clients, but at the same time, I don't like to push people into something that maybe they feel they don't want, or they're not ready for, or don't have the money for. I'm always very mindful of that. And some people would say to me, oh, well, that's an abundance attitude. And I said, well, no, it's not an abundance. It's not about abundance. It's about the fact that I recognize that there's a lot of people. I've had people tell me, you know, I would love to do some of these things, but I can't afford it. And, you know, and I understand that, because there's things that I've wanted to do. And to me, I have to really pick and choose what I spend my money on right now. You know, it's just like, you know, what am I going to, and something obviously that's more reasonably priced is something that's going to draw me in more than something that is really expensive, even if that person who's doing it is totally worth that money. Sometimes, or we feel like that would be a nice thing to have, but not something I need right now. So, I don't know, all this stuff around boundaries, but they're really just kind of getting back to the idea of people liking you. Now, the question is here, yeah, obviously we want to be, socially we want to be people, we want to get along with people, right? I think most people feel like, even people who don't share your same views, I think we generally just feel like we want to be able to go out into society and just get along with everybody. We don't necessarily want to have trouble. I mean, there are people who have certain personalities, or maybe are dealing with certain kinds of issues where they tend to be a little more chaotic by nature. And people have a hard time with that, because people don't know how to deal with that either. I dealt with that all the time when I worked as a librarian. Public librarians, see, that's another mythology about the library field, is that, oh, it's just a nice, quiet place, you're in a library. Like, people also think librarians check out books. Librarians never, unless you're the only person there, never check out books. Librarians are usually the people who, you hire staff to do that, and then you have the professionals who manage reference questions and tech and stuff like that. Like, you have, it's a whole different kind of ball game there. And, like I said, unless you're in a little small one-room library, you typically, and that person may or may not be a librarian, depending. Like in my state, you have to have more than population of more than 20,000, and then you need somebody with an MLIS degree to be able to run that library. And so, but the idea was just that when I was public, when I did, because I have a library degree. When I worked there, you had all kinds of people come in because it's a public place. And so you would have homeless people would hold up. You have the person who's looking at pornography on the computer. You have the person who's, the people who just are lonely people, speaking of, and they come up and they just want to talk to you for hours at the desk. And you're like, you have to find the graceful way to handle this. You do have people who may, be on medications or something, who may have some rather serious disorders and things that where they're suffering with it, and if they don't have a whole lot of support, that ends up being where they go. Because I always lobbied when I was a librarian that I said, public librarians don't get enough training in psych, and I think to a certain degree they need a little bit of combat pay, because sometimes that's a place where your boundaries are pushed, where you sit there and you're like, okay, this is a member of the public, and this is a member of the public who needs help, but at the same time, this is beyond what I'm hired to do and what I'm qualified to do. So it really does kind of put you in a bind with that. But dealing with people and the way that we want people to feel about us. Of course, obviously, we want everybody to like us. The reality in the world is not everybody does. And it's because we live in, as I've talked about before, we live in this kind of hall of mirrors. And the hall of mirrors effect is, it has to do entirely with projection, because that is the way that we exist. As I've mentioned, this is not the first time I've said this, but if you look into a mirror and you look at yourself, that's the way that you see yourself. You brush your hair, if you put makeup on, whatever you do, when you're getting dressed, you look at yourself in the mirror to see what you look like. If you did not have that mirror, or you didn't have something like here, I'm looking at a camera right now, your phone camera, whatever. If you didn't have something to reflect your image back to you, you wouldn't know what you looked like. Okay, you just don't know, because you can't turn your eyes around and see what you look like. So you can. I mean, I suppose people who lose their sight, maybe they have a way of determining things by feel. That's a thing that we don't really have developed, that sense either. But I mean, I suppose there's ways that people can possibly tell certain things. But oftentimes when it comes to our personality, the only way we know how we come across, I mean, I can watch this video of myself and see how I come across, right? But it's still going to be from my perspective, is you get a perspective from somebody else. Somebody else responds to you or gives you feedback or tells you things. The thing is, when somebody responds to you or gives you feedback, is that feedback, is that an objective opinion? Because I have often argued that there's no such thing as a totally objective opinion. It's almost not possible. Because just as you need that mirror of another person to see what's going on, that person needs you as a mirror, or other people. Okay, and sometimes we do this almost by statistical probability. The net number of people who like me versus those who don't, tells me something about that. Whether or not I'm successful socially or not, and that isn't necessarily true. Because again, the human personalities and the thought processes that people have are very, very complex. It's not. I know we do try to talk about these trends and patterns and different things that people tend to experience. Like I'm saying, people tend to either feel a fear of isolation or a fear of a lack of abundance, which are connected in their own way. Because either way, you feel like you're on the outside of something. Like you're not able to get the thing that you want, whether that thing is community or whether that thing is just having enough money to do the things that you want, or to have proper food, shelter, whatever. The question is, how do you deal when people don't like you? Okay, because inevitably in this world, people are going to look at you, and if they have if you have some quality that they don't like in themselves, then they're going to see that in you, and they're not going to like you for it. Okay, and really the way that probably at least one of the ways to deal with that is the fact that you have to understand that a lot of times when people dislike you, very rarely is it personal, even if it seems personal. There's generally, I mean, yeah, sometimes, occasionally it could be personal, but a lot of times it's more that, and it's not necessarily always that they're seeing something that's in themselves, or they're seeing some kind of quality that maybe they have in shadow. We all have qualities in shadow. I mean, all of us have the potential to be the best people ever, the most ethical, the most saintly, if you will. And we also have the potential to be the worst people possible. And all of that is part of the psyche. It's part of our individual and collective psyche. It's all connected in. It's not like you can draw a line between one and the other. So sometimes people can trigger things in us because we see certain behaviors, and we know how we respond and react to those behaviors. And it's either something that's going to attract us or repel us, depending on what we're going through. So I'll just give you a simple example of that. If I look at myself, I say, okay, I have been single now for, I mean, dating on and off, but yeah, I've been single for 20, I haven't been married since 2003, so that's 21 years, right? That was when I got divorced. So I have lived this life, pretty much on my own. And I will find that people who are either married or have families, or even people like my mom, they look at me and they project that I am a sad person. I'm not a sad person, but they project that because to them, happiness is predicated on having children, having a husband, and they say, oh, well, you must not be a happy person. And they always try to interpret everything I do in terms of you're just rebelling against a system. You're doing this, you're doing that. And I'm like, no, I'm just doing my thing and expressing the thing that I like. But I find that, particularly in my family, I'm very much judged for the fact that I don't have, that I've never had children. And there's a lot of women today who are in that boat. And it's interesting because there's this attitude that, oh, but that's what you have to do and that's what you have to be well, again, there's back to that biology is destiny, that somehow that's what's going to fulfill you as a woman. And a lot of women are not fulfilled by that, especially if they feel like doing that. I mean, people assume there's a biological urge, and the reality is that there's not. Maybe some women have the biological urge. I never have. And as I got older, people told me, oh no, it's going to change. You're going to want a child so badly. And I'm already in menopause, and I've said every year I wanted a child less. I didn't even think that was possible. And it's not that I don't like kids, but I did not want to spend my focus and energy and attention raising a child. I wanted to spend it on other stuff, on writing books, on doing this kind of thing, on making my podcast, on teaching, on developing my career, spending times with, that's what I wanted to spend my time on. I didn't want to spend my time raising a child. That's just not what I wanted to do. And it doesn't mean that people who do raise children are wrong somehow. I mean, yeah, obviously that's what somebody feels I really want to be a parent. Great, then be a parent. But that's never something I felt. And so that's just one example of the way in which sometimes I feel like I'm on the outside of certain groups because, or I'm judged in a certain way because I didn't choose to have that. So therefore, everything I do is either an expression of, somehow people try to say, yes, but you're just doing this because, like it's a midlife crisis kind of thing. I think I've mentioned that before. And I'm like, no, I'm well past midlife crisis at this point. And it's not that. And I don't really know about that term anyway. I feel like it's often used to try to say, basically trying to say like, oh, well, you're being immature because you're not doing it the way everybody else is doing it. And that's not an immaturity. That's just a different way of, it's a different way of sharing. It's a different way of creating. If we think about the Empress card, Empress is creative energy. Creative energy can be creating a child if you're capable of doing that. But creative energy can also be that you are, like I said, that you're making other things that you leave as a legacy. I pulled a card for this morning. Now I have my Osho Zen deck, but I also have the Mystical Cats Tarot. I think I talked about one of the cards yesterday, and for some reason this morning I was like, I have to use this deck. And the card that actually I pulled up this morning was the Ten of Earth. And you see all these cats just sitting around like in their boxes and on their things. And 10 of Earth is literally that card about being in community, being connected to family, like having an abundance that's both about maybe having enough materially and also having that abundance of being connected to family and friends and community. Definitely that energy. And that's kind of energy that we strive for. But sometimes, yeah, we have people who are going to judge us because like I travel by myself a lot of the times too. When I go abroad, I travel alone. And people say to me, they're like, "Oh, how can you go abroad and travel alone? That's scary. How can you do that?" And I'm like, I've had people say, "I can't even go to the grocery store by myself. Like, how can you do that?" I'm like, it's very simple. You have to be okay with yourself. A lot of times you have to be sure too that you don't want just a lot of other people around to make noise because somehow you don't like yourself or don't want to be with yourself. That can be an issue too for some people, that they just don't like being in their own company. And I feel like that's an important skill that people need to develop. That's why I personally, and again, everybody's different, but personally, I would never advise, like, say, getting married young, because I feel like you need some time to kind of be alone and figure stuff out before you get into a relationship. But again, everybody's different. I don't want to make any kind of blanket statement about what people should or shouldn't do. But that's kind of a thing. I always feel like having that time to yourself is a good thing. Because and again, sometimes people have it. I've also known people who have been identified with either a person or a job or a situation their entire life. And then when they get to a point where they either retire or their spouse passes away or something happens, and some people can't take that because they don't know how to behave on their own. They don't know how to be alone. Others end up embracing it and they go out and they start doing all this stuff that they never did before. It all depends on your personality. And I've been surprised by some people who I have known who I've thought, oh my gosh, their identity is so tied up in this thing that they're doing that I don't see how they're going to make it when they walk away from this. But they do. And some of them and I'm thinking, good for them, make the most of life. Life, we want to be with people, but there has to be, it's like I was talking about yesterday with love relationships. It's like, yes, you want to be with that person, but you also need to keep that independence as well. You are a person. You're not an extension, accessory, or appendage to somebody else. And but that said, yes, we do want to be able to get on with people, and generally, so that's why we have to sometimes you have to pick your battles, decide when you're going to be contentious, when you're not going to be contentious with something. When do you need to stand up for yourself? When do you need to just say, you know what, this isn't worth fighting about? And these are all these kinds of skills that we have. But that connection to other people is often something that can provide a certain amount of suffering. So if I backtrack on that and I say, okay, well, if I go back to what Megan said originally, I say, okay, well, what then is really, I was talking about not taking things personally in terms of projection, but Megan had also said, she goes, really, she says the idea that we're alone is kind of silly. She goes, because we're never alone. We may think that we are, but there's somebody there. There's usually somebody who is in our support system, somebody who's on our side and is willing to, whether it be somebody from family, and if it's not our family, we find our tribe as we go along, right? You find friends, you find people who are connected to you. And sometimes, rather than focus on the people who you feel are being exclusionary, because it can be personality differences. Maybe you just don't like the same things. You don't, for what you have different values. Okay. Sometimes people exclude people because they're jealous of what they're doing, and so people may do that out of a sense of competitiveness. That's what I was talking about this in the live stream I did yesterday afternoon for Katonia about the wounded masculine, the way in which that can make us competitive and make us try to say, if somebody's doing something that they are excelling at, you may want to turn around and say, oh yeah, but, or just dismiss it. Sometimes some people being dismissive and not paying attention can feel as wounding as somebody who just criticizes something outright, So anyway, we're already at 7:00, so I want to do our reading. I do feel like I want to do a cat reading today. Yeah, I showed the Five of Pentacles. Here's the Mystical Cats version of that card. And you see the cat who's, there's the cats who are warm inside, and he's out in the snow and he's looking in. There's another favorite card here I have too about mental thought. I like to, because the Eight of Swords in traditional tarot is the woman who looks like she's bound and blindfolded and she's amid all these swords. This one I love because it shows a cat who is stuck under a branch. But so he thinks he's trapped, but he's not. He just has to roll a certain way, and he will get out from under this branch. But there's that panic of thinking that you're trapped in a certain way. I thought that was an interesting spin on that card. So okay, so I'm gonna pull some from the Mystical Cats today, and let's see what we come up with. And I happen to be a major cat person. I love cats so much, but at the moment I don't have any, just because I like to travel and I wouldn't be able to take care of a cat if I was, if I'm going to go over to the UK for 6 months, I can't take care of a cat. So okay, anyway. All right, so our first card here that we have, I did the same kind of spread I would do with Osho Zen, is Sky King, which is the King of Swords. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. This is a card of emotional detachment. Okay, looking at things very logically, clinically. What are the facts? Just the facts on something, and trying to take our emotions out of a situation. Now, again, there's times when we need to, if our emotions are overflowing, it's almost like if you're having a flood. You have to kind of, okay, we got to stop the flooding here. We got to do that. And oftentimes the way we do that with our feelings is to bring our reason and logic into it. Say, whoa, or to try to ground ourselves and say, whoa, wait a minute, am I making more out of this than what it is, or are my emotions kind of carrying me on this wave towards something, and do I need to center? Of course, the other thing, if we look at this cat, he looks very. He looks kind of like a ticked off cat, right? but he looks he looks at the way people assume cats look at you, very coldly. And so the other side of that is that sometimes we can leave emotions out to our detriment. So this is really, to me, about finding that balance between logic and emotions. Okay, and the other feeling, though, we have the Fire King. Okay, so this is our King of Wands card, and the King of Wands this is like the Creator card in the other one. This is this fiery energy, this creative energy. And with respect to emotion, when we look at fire and air together, air is where we may be very talkative or very intellectual, or we have a lot of thoughts. Okay, fire, of course, is that intensity that we have that makes us want to do stuff. And one of the big stressors that we can have, I know as somebody who has Grand Fire Trine and a lot of fire in my chart, is sometimes I can be really I can almost feel the energy come up, I want to do stuff, but then you get overwhelmed, you want to do everything at once, or you don't know where to start first, or the thing you really want to do you can't do right now, and then that energy can turn into frustration. And then it can turn into a stress, and then it can turn into that feeling of, oh my God, I can't do it. It's this, it's that, So this kind of may indicate an inner fire that may be going on, that can stress us out. And the external feeling of which we're aware here, this is the Seven of Earth. This is another one I like, because this is the Seven of Pentacles card, and I love it because it's the cat just watching and waiting, for his prey to come out, and I think that's another really good representation of that card, because Seven of Pentacles can be, we're reevaluating and saying, is this going the way I want it to? Do I need to abandon course? But the other attitude of Seven of Earth, as I think I showed in the Osho Zen deck, that was the pregnant woman sitting there with all the moons, and it's the Patience card. So it's the idea of you're watching and waiting for something. You're waiting for the result, the reward, what comes at the end. And you feel like you're in a period of waiting. So when I look at these three together, you have this idea that you are maybe trying to stay detached, rational, trying to use your mind, trying to plan, trying to work with this energy that it's almost like you're sitting there with your motor running. You're ready to go, but you're stuck in traffic. You can't go. So you just have to wait. And that's a thing that I feel like that always kind of backs our energy up to some degree. Yeah, and then we have this Five of Sky card. Okay, this is the Five of Swords, and you see these cats like they're hissing at this other Sphinx cat that's over here, and yeah. So I think there's a sense here that it kind of going into what I'm saying when we feel like we want to do something, or we want to move ahead, or we want to expand our community, or we want to move out, and we have all of these plans that and the intensity to go with it, but we don't have the external factors that are allowing us to move ahead. We may feel cut off. We may feel limited. It's interesting because this is like the idea that of others not liking us, right? The idea that, we're defeated in some way. So this is basically saying, when the Five of Swords comes up, I feel like it's that energy of not recognizing that what the limitations that you feel based on the external environment may just be coming from the fact that maybe you want to do things before their proper time, or that you may have this intensity and because like I said, fire can inspire you, and fire can also create this kind of anxiety in you, and so there's this need. And so you end up trying to try to cut that off. You're trying to stem the tide, but without that fire totally going out, because you don't want to get to a point where you're not inspired, where you're not motivated, and where you just don't want to do anything, because that can be a result too. You can have a while of feeling like if you're just hitting one brick wall after another, you just go, fine, I give up. Although sometimes giving up is the thing to do. Sometimes the second you give up is the moment that things actually happen for you. Now the outcome here is interesting. We have Three of Sky and Ace of Sky. So that's interesting, because Three of Sky, this is Three of Swords, okay, in this particular deck. And so it may be suggesting that for some people, this is a time of separation from something. Separations are sometimes necessary. Sometimes we may spend too much time and energy trying to appease a certain group of people rather than being true to our own authentic voice. And it came out with the Ace of Sky. And the Ace of Sky is the Ace of Swords. So to me, this is about new thought, new ways of thinking about things. So I think the message here is when you're hitting this brick wall, when you have all of this energy and momentum to move towards something, when you have all these plans, when you want to do something and you feel like you're frustrated, you feel like you're blocked, you feel like you're waiting for something to happen and you don't know if or when something's going to happen, it may be saying you have to think about this differently. You may need to separate. Separation, it may be necessary because sometimes too this comes out of past experience. We feel like, okay, I'm ready to do this. It's not happening. Oh, see, I had this thing before. This didn't happen, and this didn't happen, and this didn't happen. And so, now you may be moving into a space where it's like, okay, sometimes when you're boxed in, it's because it was like that Eight of Sky card that I showed you. It's like, okay, maybe you're approaching this. Maybe you're only looking at the fact that this cat's stuck under the branch, not looking that if I went to this side, I would be able to roll out of this and get out from underneath, where I feel trapped. Or where we're staring at this wall. There's a card, I think it's in the dream cards, where somebody's clinging to the bars of a cell, but behind him it's completely open. So sometimes it's just that we need to turn around and look at something a little bit differently. So that's the energy that I'm seeing here today, is just this idea that we may have intellect versus the way in which we want to push ahead with something. And Five of Sky, I think, as opposed to Eight of Sky, comes up because this may come up really with respect to the topic that I had today, that maybe we feel that we're not being supported in some way, or that other people are criticizing us or don't like what we're doing, or not, or in some way we feel like we may be on our own. And this may be saying that Three of Sky to me is more like, okay, yeah, if there are people who are deliberately constantly making you feel bad about what you're doing, you may want to separate from those people. Sometimes we need to make decisions about who we associate with or who we allow to influence us. It's kind of like if you look into a mirror and that mirror makes you look distorted in some way, then you want to go find a mirror that doesn't, right? Because those distortions, again, might be coming from that person and maybe what they're projecting onto you, and what they think, how they measure success, or what they want, or they may look at you and like if I go back to the parent example, sometimes there's women, who have children and maybe they're tired and they look at you and they're like, yeah, you single over there, like they maybe wish they could be, but at least there's an aspect that now and again that they say, yeah, I would just like to have all that time to myself. So they might try to judge you on that because they're envious. Again, that's just an example. That's certainly not all women in all situations, but it can happen. So a lot of times I think there is a need to detach and step back a little bit when we feel wounded or criticized by people. Like, well, where is this coming from? And is this a legit criticism of something that I'm doing? Because we don't have to always modify our behavior for other people. Sometimes other people just are saying, oh, well, I don't like what you're doing. Okay, then you don't like what I'm doing. I mean, then you don't have to participate in what I do. So, it's interesting, but certainly this theme of wanting people to like us seems to be something that's come up this week, and the way in which we are allowed to establish boundaries and allowed to make decisions about how we want relationships to go. So, okay, so we're at 10 past, so I probably will, that will be it for today, but thank you guys so much for joining me. If you've missed any part of this, it will be, the recording will be on Instagram, and I'm going to upload it to YouTube this morning before I go out and mow the lawn, a task I'm not really looking forward to, but we're going to have storms the rest of the week, so if I don't do it today, my grass will be longer than my lawnmower can handle. So anyway, you don't need to mow all that. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll be back here tomorrow morning with another 6:30 a.m. live stream. So if you care to join me then, I will be here then. Have a great day in the meantime. Take care.